It all began with two elderly black grandparents enjoying what should have been a simple Sunday outing. Ezekiel and Loretta Monroe, married for 50 years, had planned nothing extravagant, just a quiet drive and a stop at a small roadside diner they used to frequent long ago. Their vintage white Buick carried them smoothly down the back roads of Charleston, South Carolina, with gospel music floating out the windows like a prayer. For them, this wasn't about luxury. It was about nostalgia and savoring peach cobbler and coffee together without the bustle of family visits. The morning was golden. Loretta pointed out wildflowers along the road, reminding Ezekiel of how they once pressed them into his Bible decades ago. He chuckled, recalling he still had some petals tucked in the Book of Psalms. For the Monroes, this was more than a car ride. It was a celebration of love, survival, and shared memories. When they pulled into the gravel lot of the old diner, they expected nothing but warmth. The chipped paint, rusted roof, and delicious smell of bacon made it feel timeless. Ezekiel, leaning on his cane, helped Loretta out of the car as they walked hand in hand toward the shaded porch. But before they could even sit down, their peace was shattered. A police cruiser skidded into the lot, gravel scattering under its tires. Two officers stepped out, one tall, broad-shouldered with mirrored sunglasses and an unreadable face, the other younger, chewing gum with a smug detachment. Their presence immediately shifted the air from calm to tense. The taller officer pointed at the Buick. "That your car, sir?" Ezekiel blinked, confused. "Yes, of course. Can you prove that?" The officer pressed, already stepping closer. Loretta stiffened, gripping Ezekiel's arm. She softly explained they'd owned the car for decades. Still, the younger cop circled it suspiciously, muttering something about the plates not matching. Ezekiel offered to let them check the VIN number, but the taller officer sneered as if the suggestion was convenient rather than helpful. Then came the chilling words, "We're investigating possible auto theft." The Monroes were stunned. After a lifetime of paying taxes, raising children, and surviving the harsh tides of racism and discrimination, here they were, treated like criminals in broad daylight. Their Buick wasn't just a vehicle. It held decades of family history, college drop-offs, road trips, and sleeping grandchildren in the back seat. To see it pawed over by strangers with badges was humiliating. The officers ignored their protests, rifling through compartments and waving a photo of their grandchildren like it was evidence. Loretta's voice cracked as she declared, "Those are our grandchildren. This is our life. You don't get to treat us like thieves." But her words fell on deaf ears. The officers escalated instead of listening. A small crowd began to gather. Diners, passers-by, even a waitress wiping flour from her apron. Phones came out, capturing the indignity. What should have been a peaceful Sunday morning was now a public spectacle of suspicion and disrespect. And then, just as the humiliation deepened, the distant rumble of tires on gravel announced a new arrival, a black SUV pulling into the lot. Inside was someone who would change everything. Their Marine son. The black SUV came to a steady stop beside the diner, its engine humming with authority. The doors swung open, and out stepped Marcus Monroe, the Monroes' only son, a decorated Marine who had just returned from his latest deployment. Broad-shouldered, upright, and radiating quiet strength, Marcus carried the discipline of years in service in every movement. His uniform wasn't on. Today he was in a plain t-shirt and jeans, but his presence alone commanded attention. Loretta's eyes welled with relief as she whispered, "Marcus." He immediately noticed his parents standing in the middle of the parking lot, Ezekiel clutching his cane while two officers hovered around them like predators circling prey. Marcus's jaw tightened. He had seen injustice overseas, but nothing struck him harder than seeing his parents, two elders who had given their lives to faith, family, and community, treated like common criminals in their own hometown. "What's going on here?" Marcus demanded, his voice sharp enough to cut the tension. The taller officer turned, unimpressed. "Who are you?" "I'm their son," Marcus replied, stepping closer, his frame towering over both officers. "And I want to know why my elderly parents are standing here being interrogated like suspects." The younger officer smirked, gum snapping between his teeth. "We got a call about a stolen vehicle. Plates don't seem to match. Just doing our job." Marcus's eyes narrowed. "Their vehicle? That Buick has been in our family longer than you've been drawing a paycheck. Did you even bother to run the VIN? Or did you just see an elderly black couple in a nice car and decide to play sheriff?" The tall officer bristled. "Watch your tone. We don't need lectures from you." "Then maybe you'll listen to credentials," Marcus snapped. He pulled out his military ID and held it up, his voice steady but rising with intensity. "Staff Sergeant Marcus Monroe, United States Marine Corps. I've spent years defending freedoms abroad, and I'll be damned if I stand by while you strip them from my parents here at home." The crowd, which had grown larger, erupted in murmurs of support. Phones were lifted higher, capturing every second of the exchange. A waitress shouted from the porch, "Leave those people alone. Everyone here knows them." For the first time, the officers faltered. The younger one shifted nervously while the older stiffened, clearly unaccustomed to being challenged so directly. Loretta reached out and touched Marcus's arm, her voice trembling but strong. "Don't let them disrespect your father like this." Marcus turned back to the officers, his voice low but firm. "You've made a mistake. Admit it. Because right now, the only thing stolen here is dignity, and you're the thieves." The parking lot fell into silence. All eyes were on the officers now, and the weight of their decisions hung in the heavy summer air. But instead of apologizing, the taller officer doubled down, insisting, "We'll sort this out at the station." He grabbed Ezekiel's arm, attempting to move him toward the cruiser. That was the last straw. Marcus stepped forward, placing himself between his father and the officer, his eyes blazing. "Touch him again," he warned, "and you'll regret it." The confrontation had reached its breaking point, and with the cameras rolling, the officers were seconds away from making the worst mistake of their careers. The taller officer's grip on Ezekiel's arm tightened for a moment before he froze, realizing just how close Marcus now stood. The Marine's frame loomed between him and the frail old man he had been manhandling. Marcus's eyes burned with a controlled fury that spoke louder than shouting ever could. "You don't want to do this," Marcus said evenly, his voice like steel wrapped in calm. "Not here. Not in front of all these witnesses." The crowd was no longer silent. Someone called out, "That's Sergeant Monroe's parents." Another voice shouted, "We've known them for years. Leave them be." The weight of community recognition bore down, and the officers could feel it pressing harder than their badges. The younger officer shifted nervously, glancing at the phones recording from every angle. His gum chewing had stopped, his bravado fading. "Sarge, maybe we should just—" But the older officer cut him off sharply. "Quiet. We're doing our job." His voice cracked ever so slightly, betraying his slipping confidence. Marcus didn't flinch. He drew himself taller, every inch the Marine who had stood at checkpoints in hostile territory. "Your job?" he repeated. "Your job is to protect and serve, not harass and humiliate. My parents are pillars of this community. My father is a retired pastor. My mother runs food drives for the needy. And you? You're treating them like criminals over a car they've owned longer than you've worn that badge." The words struck home. Ezekiel, though shaken, straightened his shoulders with pride as Marcus spoke. Loretta clutched her son's arm, drawing strength from his presence. The older officer tried to reassert control. "Sir, you're interfering with police business. Step aside, or we'll have to detain you as well." The crowd gasped, waiting for Marcus's reaction. He leaned in closer, his voice low, firm, and laced with authority. "You think you can detain me? You lay one hand on me, and you'll be explaining it to my commanding officers, the Pentagon, and every media outlet already filming this mess. Go ahead. Test me." The tension snapped like a taut wire. The officer's bravado crumbled. For the first time, he hesitated, his hand hovering awkwardly near his belt but refusing to move further. The younger officer looked down, clearly unwilling to escalate anymore. At that moment, one of the bystanders, an elderly diner regular, stepped forward, pointing his phone squarely at the officers. "It's already live," he said. "Whole county's watching this right now." The color drained from the older cop's face. His authority had slipped entirely from his grasp. The situation had turned, and he knew it. Marcus glanced around at the witnesses, then back to the officers. "Now, here's what's going to happen. You're going to take those cuffs off my parents, apologize to them, and you're going to do it now. Or this video becomes tomorrow's headline, and your careers are over." The silence was deafening. The balance of power fully shifted. The next move the officers made would determine whether this was simply an ugly incident or the collapse of their professional lives. The older officer's chest rose and fell heavily, as if the weight of every camera lens trained on him had finally sunk in. His partner, unable to withstand the growing tension, muttered nervously, "Maybe we should just let them go, Sarge. This is getting out of hand." But it already was out of hand. The crowd pressed in closer, their voices growing louder. Demanding justice, demanding respect. Someone shouted, "Say you're sorry." Another, "Those people don't deserve this." Marcus's eyes locked on the taller officer like a drill sergeant addressing a recruit. "You heard them. Make it right." For a moment, pride warred with reality on the officer's face. His authority had cracked. His arrogance had no ground to stand on. Slowly, reluctantly, he reached for the cuffs. With an audible click, the steel restraints fell away from Ezekiel's wrists. The old man rubbed his skin, not from pain, but from the deep insult of ever having been bound. The officer cleared his throat, his words stiff and graceless. "Sir, ma'am. Sorry for the inconvenience." Loretta's eyes filled with tears, but her voice rang steady. "Inconvenience?" she repeated. "You humiliated us. You treated us like criminals in front of strangers, in front of our own son. No apology can erase that." Marcus placed a hand gently on her shoulder, steadying her. He turned back to the officers. "This isn't over. You'll answer for this, to your superiors, to the public, and to everyone here who saw how you treated two respected elders." The crowd erupted in applause and cheers, voices lifting in support of the Monroes. What had started as a private humiliation had become a public reckoning. By the next morning, clips of the incident were circulating online, viewed hundreds of thousands of times. Local news stations ran the story under headlines like, "Marine confronts officers over racial profiling," and "Elderly couple wrongfully accused." Community leaders, church groups, and civil rights advocates rallied around the Monroes, demanding accountability. The police department could not ignore it. An official statement followed within days, announcing that both officers involved had been placed on administrative leave pending investigation. Their conduct, once shielded by silence and authority, was now exposed under a floodlight of public outrage. For Ezekiel and Loretta, the ordeal was painful, but it also revealed something powerful: that their dignity was not theirs alone to defend. Their son's courage and the community's support turned shame into strength. Marcus, though fierce in his defense, reminded his parents gently that night. "They can strip titles, they can strip badges, but they can't strip honor. You've lived your lives with honor. That's untouchable." Ezekiel nodded slowly, his voice quiet but resolute. "And today, son, you showed them what honor really looks like." What began as an attempt to humiliate two elderly black grandparents ended instead as a moment of reckoning for those who had underestimated them. With their Marine son by their side, the Monroes left not defeated, but vindicated, proof that respect and justice could still prevail when courage stood firm against prejudice.